So we are aware of all the programs that they have and well knowledge and their assistance. You may ask why it's so important that they hire a title company. Well, what a title company is we provide title insurance to the consumers. We also handle your transaction. We act as a third neutral party that handles the transaction, and everything comes through our office. Like the contract is brought to us, the earnest money, all that good stuff it comes through the title company. You're probably wondering why title insurance is so important. And title insurance is important because it protects you from problems with ownership title when you are purchasing the property through a real estate transaction. What some of the problems that may arise is, unpaid property taxes, fraudulent paperwork, an unknown spouse, unpaid liens, all that good stuff. And it's here to protect you as a consumer when you're purchasing that property. Then, again, everything is handled through our office. You're not having to go through the seller directly. It's coming through our office. The earnest money that you bring to our office is held in escrow, and we make sure that it's being applied properly through your transaction. We want to go now to the steps to closing of the transaction. And what happens there is National Title receives the contract. Not only does it receive it, but we also are informed that there's a lender involved. So while the title company is starting their process, so is the lender. And what that consists of, as soon as we receive the contract, we also receive the earnest money. And what earnest money is that's telling the seller that you are ready and are serious about purchasing their home. In the contract, it does state, and a lot of people don't really understand the part of the earnest money in the contract now. As soon as the contract is executed, it states that the earnest money should be at the title company within 3 days of the effective date of the contract. When we receive that earnest money, the lenders prefer that we receive a wire transfer or a cashier's check. And the reason I'm pointing that out is because the lender is going to want to be able to source where that money is coming from. It could cause problems later on at the end where it's not being applied properly if we're getting funds as cash or through a money order. Well, once we receive that contract, we start our title work examinations. We're pulling all the title work from when the property is vacant land up until the day of closing. Then after that, we review it. If there are any title issues, we try to cure them by the time that it has on the date or before. So again, we can close on or before the date on the contract. We issue the title report and it's sent out to all of the parties so that everybody is informed of what is on that property. So if there's ever any doubt of what the commitment has, you are more than welcome to reach out to the title company and we'll go over that title commitment so that you are aware of what you're purchasing. Once we have met all the requirements to satisfy a clear title, we then go towards what we would call closing. In order to close, we would have to receive the documents from the lender. We cannot close without the lender. We have to have their documents to be able to give you the correct numbers for you to bring to closing. And once we have, usually the lender gives you a pretty good loan estimate of what you're going to be paying prior to you even coming to closing. They'll provide you with their loan estimate or a preliminary closing disclosure with all the charges on there and what you're going to be paying. But again, it will be pretty close to what they've already have provided. And then from there, once we have the documentation from the lender, we start to prepare them and put them all together so that we can schedule you for a closing and you can come to our office and start the paperwork, signing the paperwork. We will give you not a long version, a detailed version of what you're signing, but we will definitely ask you if we're going too slow or we're going too fast, so that you understand exactly what you're signing and what you are purchasing. And then once that is done, we send back the documentation to the lender that all the parties have signed. They give us authorization for you to be able to receive the keys to your home. And at the end, I think everybody is happy to, to see me, because I'm pretty much the last person that they see. And usually I'm the one that gives them the keys. After closing, you will receive the title that the seller has signed. That usually takes between 2 weeks to a month to receive. We have to file that deed of record with the county before we are able to send you the original, along with the title insurance policy. The title insurance policy, again, is what you will have as documentation to have proof in case anyone tries to ask you for a charge that we didn't collect or we missed. That is something that you can fall back onto. But that is the purpose of why the title insurance is so important. Again, the title company is the one that's guaranteeing that title is free and clear, not your seller, but the title company. And so that is why our role is so vital. And not only are we providing you an owner's policy, we're also providing one for the lender, because we're ensuring that the title is free and clear to the property that they've gave funds for. And then we can go ahead and move along to the what can stop you at closing table. Some of the things that I have seen is last minute, something has happened, change of employment before closing funds not being verified, major purchases done prior to closing that can affect you from having to come to a closing table. Also an expired ID. A lot of people do not understand that we're in the state of Texas, and we do require that your spouse signs at the closing table. Those are some of the examples that where they are not able to close. We really haven't had that many worst case scenarios where we haven't been able to close. I mentioned them already. And then
yeah, let's go ahead and have Erica come in and just talk a little bit about her closing process, and then you can continue on about the kind of the tips or what to look out for. So I think those are very important. You mentioned like not changing a job. I tell people freeze, don't move. You know what I mean? And you want everything to be exactly the last thing that the lender saw, so you can get to that closing. But Erica, Ms. Parker, can you come on and just share a little bit about your closing experience? We appreciate you.
Yes. Good evening. Can y'all hear me okay?
yes, ma'am.
Can go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. I remember when we put the earnest money down, I said my mom, I sent my mom $1,000 for the earnest money through Zelle. And she went to get the cashier's check for me because I was at work. And like they said, that timeline is super short. And I knew I just wouldn't have time to do it during business hours. And so I Zelled it to my mom so she could do it for me. But even Zelling that $1,000 to my mom, like my mortgage company, my lending company asked about that, right? Like, where did this money go? Why did you move $1,000? And I was like, so I could put the earnest money down. I had to write them a letter. I had to write them a letter about it. And then to fund the down payment, I actually withdrew money from my 401k. And so the same thing, lending company wanted me to explain, why I took $20,000 out of my 401k to put down on the why did I take $20,000 out of my 401k account? I said, hey, I'm trying to buy a house. This is my down payment. I had to, write a statement on that as well. And so, what they're saying about being able to source that money and like just monitoring where all of your cash flow is coming from, like those are very serious are very real scenarios where, these people are gonna, these people, that are these companies that are, taking this loan out.
They're taking a big risk, right?
Right. They're taking a big risk and they definitely want to make sure that you're good for it, right? We're talking about, $250,000. So they definitely want to know that you're good for it and you're not going to fold on the loan once you get into the property. And so I know as we were moving up to closing, like they said, I had the pre-closing documents that were giving me the estimate for what I was going to have to put down. And, the number changed maybe by about $300, maybe. But within the last few days of me closing, they check my credit over and over again. I remember just getting all those alerts because, of course, when you're trying to buy a house, your credit is very, very important. And so I was getting all the alerts from, my FICO and Credit Karma and, Credit Wise, all those little apps, right? They were just saying, hey, this person's looking at your credit. They're pulling it. Luckily for me, I was in an apartment moving into my house, right? And so there weren't any like unplanned expenses coming out. But that micromanaging through the whole process, it took me about 3 months from the time I decided, okay, I want to buy a house. I got my pre-approval. It took me about 3 months between pre-approval and closing. I say 3 months, but yeah, December 1st, I got my pre-approval. And then February the 25th, we signed the closing documents. And so, the closing process, I was super grateful to buy a house in South Fair because I didn't necessarily have a place to meet I bought my house during COVID. And so we weren't able to go to the title company's office or anything like that. So I didn't really necessarily have a place to host them. I didn't have like a little office to host them. And so we were going to meet at the property. Okay. Which I'm so glad that we didn't because it took like 2 hours to sign all that paperwork. And I would have been standing up that whole time if Miss Annie didn't allow us to use that conference room. But you guys, I was so excited for that day. I like got a dress made. I was like so excited for that day. Okay. So I got work. It was so great. But then, you sign all the paperwork and then they take the check, right? This is the biggest check I've ever written in my life. It was like a $14,000, biggest check I've ever written in my life. But it felt like it made me really feel like an adult, right? Like I'm really adulting right now. I'm buying a house,
That's a major accomplishment.
Yeah. It was one of the best moments, one of the best days of my life. I definitely say that. And then after we signed all the documents, my family and we all went out to eat for dinner that night just because I was like, you guys, I bought a house. Yay. And after they, verified the funds, the check cleared, they said, okay, you can come back and get the keys. And it was, I went in the house and I like ran around the house and I was all on my Snapchat and, it was a really exciting time, but I definitely had to be patient. Like that whole 3 months, from, getting the pre-approval all the way to closing, like any transaction over $500, didn't directly go into a bill, right? Like I had to kind of speak to where that money was going. And so, you know, when they talk about like financial literacy and just, you know, making sure your credit is together, making sure you're stable, like you actually have to prove that you're stable throughout the process where you're searching and offering earnest money and all these things, right? To make sure that, you're good for it. So you do have to prove that for an extended, for, you know, a period of time, right? Until you have the keys. And yeah, it wasn't very like stressful, but it was something I had to be conscious of throughout the whole process.
Oh, thank you. You said a good point where you said you have to stay ready throughout the process. So it's not just about getting mortgage ready. You have to stay mortgage ready to the very end. And so, yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Thank you, Ms. Parker. So nice to see you again. I appreciate you coming on and sharing. I know that's helpful information for everybody.
Yes, no, thank you so much for having me. It was, like I said, it was an awesome experience for me, and I'm definitely encouraging everybody to do the work that it takes to get in there, because once you have your own, it's this feeling. I can't even explain the feeling, right? That sense of security, right? That sense of peace to having your own place. So it's definitely worth the hard work.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. All right. So, Erica Puente, do you have any other comments on those closing examples? We have, I think, a couple of questions for you as well.
Yeah, I see some here.
Go ahead.
I'm probably not going to be able to go through the entire title commitment, but I see that there are some questions. One, as I mentioned, one of the worst case that can happen is if a spouse is not present at closing. Now, I do want to go ahead and tell you that as soon as you're starting your process to purchase a property, I see there's a question about divorce. So that, yes, that can impact you not closing. You want to make sure that if you are married and you on the process of the divorce, that we would prefer that the divorce to be finalized, but if not, we're going to ask that that person be, the lender is primarily the lender's request for a title company as well, for us to ensure that their lien is perfected, that the spouse is present. After you purchase the property, because again, we're in the state of Texas, so it's a community property state. So they're going to require that your spouse sign at closing. There's not really any document that states they're giving their rights away because the property hasn't even been purchased yet. What you could do is just purchase a property, they sign at closing, and just make sure that you follow through with the divorce. And I would recommend that they do not step foot in that property or live in the property, if that makes sense. I see there's another question about, again, separation. And that's still the same case scenario. The lender and the title company will require that the spouse be present at closing to sign. Some cases, the lender will allow for you to sign, for the spouse to sign a power of attorney so that they won't have to sign at closing. But again, that has to be approved by the lender.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. We've had a couple of scenarios just with our South Fair clients about that divorce separation type deal. So it's always best to get everything cleared and everything finalized, right, Marianne?
Yes, I've had an actual transaction where the purchaser was coming to closing and they both had agreed to come sign, but in the end he came and he didn't want to sign. We could not do the closing.
Wow. Well, I've noticed one thing that I've noticed also is having to do this with an out-of-state person, spouse, and having to get that transaction done and documents done. It actually didn't happen in that case. So it's a tricky situation. So just recommending do your research and make sure that you know who you're dealing with in your home buyer team.
Right. And then I also see a question about co-borrowers.
Yes.
I mean, most lenders do allow co-borrowers. I'm not going to say that that's not ideal, but when they are co-borrowers, they are still going to be on title. Usually, if they're a co-borrower, they're going to be on the loan. So they're going to be on title. So eventually, if they later on want to purchase their own home, the way that you would take them off title is you would have to refinance to be able to take off that co-borrower.
That's not too bad.
And there's another question. This may be a lender question. They ask, so when they sign at closing, does that mean they have to go through the lender pre-approval process too? I think they're talking about that spouse. We have, not to call you out, Kip, but we have Kip on the phone. I mean, on the Zoom here. Kip, can you answer that for Ms. Garner?
No, you don't have to go through if it's a spouse. So normally what will happen if there is a spouse, they will have certain documents as long as it's been declared on the application. They have certain documents that they will sign, e-sign or what have you. And then at closing, most of them have already been signed. And then if let's just say the parties do not get along and one can go in earlier to sign and then one afterwards, so what have you. But we will work with them.
All right, thank you, sir. Okay, do we have any other questions or comments for Erica?
Miss Annie.
Yes.
I was going to recommend maybe we do happen to be lucky also as we are with Kip and everyone that's attended tonight, but we do have Miss Tammy South Hall, the housing program manager with the Department of Housing and Revitalization, and she handles down payment assistance. And I know they look seriously at documents and divorce. If we could get a comment from her, it would be great.
Yeah. Hi, Tammy.
Hello, good afternoon. So as Erica stated earlier, because Texas is a community property state, if a person is separated or in the process of divorce, we let those buyers know that spouse will be required to sign our deeds. So we always recommend try to get that stuff resolved first before you get to closing.
Thank you, Tammy.
I also want to point out that if your spouse is away or not around, before you go ahead and enter into the contract, it would be recommended that they do a power of attorney for a purchaser or a seller. It would be better. We can do a remote closing for them. But we could do the remote closing. That would be better. We would actually like to have their original signatures, but if they're not in a position where they can attend the closing, I recommend that they do a power of attorney before they execute the contract and before they start moving into the loan process to avoid any delays.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you, ma'am. Any other questions or comments for Erica? Right. Well, if you do, you definitely reach out to South Fair. We're able to help you and to see you through that process to get you mortgage ready so you can go visit Erica at the closing table. Thank you, Erica.